So the Cocos Islands are in the middle of the Indian Ocean.
The top right-hand corner of the Indian Ocean.
2,700 kilometres northwest of Perth, Western Australia.
We're made up of 27 islands altogether.
The Cocos Keeling Islands are a tiny Australian territory where the descendants of slaves live cheek by jowl with their former master.
The first peoples were definitely slaves. They were parted in a ship to this place, probably with force and without much of a choice.
For over 150 years, one Scottish family ruled the Cocos Keeling Islands like their own tiny kingdom.
The Scottish dancing they do, that was from our Hogmanay festival. We kept this place going for 6 generations of family administration, family rule.
In 1984, Australia helped free the Muslim community from their colonial masters, but democracy would come at a cost.
There's still that sort of sense of control. You're always bowing to someone.
Now that the Cocos Islands are Australian, the pub is as crowded as the mosque. But Canberra has military ambitions for their island home.
It has made us a target for a nuclear strategic missile. I don't think that was quite explained to people at the time.
If the Cocos Islanders are to have a say in their own future, the colonial master and his former subjects must reconcile their differences and take on the new rulers in Canberra.
Johnny, you can't give him the full power. You want him there, but control him.
What could possibly go wrong?
So how's things? Good?
The Cocos Keeling Islands are an Australian territory with a majority Muslim population. Nearly 3,000 kilometres off the coast of Western Australia, they're closer to Sri Lanka than Sydney. Of the 27 islands in the Cocos archipelago, only 2 are permanently inhabited, and by 2 radically different communities.
I usually tell people I live in one country, work in a different country, because the culture is so different.
On Home Island are the pious and teetotal Cocos Malays. Descendants of slaves and convicts brought here to work on coconut plantations.
And the two-up song.
While on West Island, an Anglo-Australian community claims the dubious distinction as some of the world's heaviest beer drinkers.
Come in, Spinner. Big spin. Up.
West Island's most infamous resident is John Clunies Ross, whose family governed these islands for over 150 years.
Is that not a sexy banana? Look at that. Just satisfying holding one of these. Look at that. Oh, can hardly get your hand around it.
John was in his early 20s when he saw his father, John Clunies Ross Sr., dethroned as ruler of the Cocos Keeling Islands, marking the end of a privileged upbringing.
That's the Queen of England scoping my dad.
When Australia took control, John's family soon descended into bankruptcy.
I got a call from the administrator saying that, you got to go now. And I said, well, yeah, I'm not leaving. It's stupid. This is my house. And they said, well, we'll send the police around and we'll kick you off. And I said, well, it's blood will flow. I mean, this is not happening.
John lost the family mansion and his inheritance. He was forced to accept a new life on the Cocos Islands under Australian rules.
So, at the moment, we've got the Border Force guys here keeping an eye on us all. And that's pretty much where 200 years ago my great-great-great-great-great-grandpa, so 6 generations ago, would have come in through the heads here and put down roots.
John still carries the divisive legacy of his colonial family. The first Clunies Ross to settle here laid claim to the Cocos Islands. planting coconuts with a workforce of indentured labourers and convicts collected from across Southeast Asia.
The Malay community came here originally on my family's ships, and then to work the plantations we brought more and more in from around Malaysia, Indonesia.
These girls are not wearing their Sunday best. This is their normal work attire as they skillfully slice up the coconut.
It was quite an advanced community, especially for the area, for around this sector in Asia. We kept this place going for 6 generations, so 200 years of family administration, family rule, with no outside reference at all, till mid-80s, 84, and the Commonwealth took over.
The islands now form one of the territories of the Commonwealth of Australia.
The speaker's there, just signalling the break of fast. So, the first people who came to Cocos were definitely slaves, and that was their purpose.
Siti Ruqaiya lives on Home Island in a community of around 450 Cocos Malays. Like most people here, her family traces its roots back to the original settlers.
Apparently we've got a little bit of Dutch, Papua, Chinese, Malaysian specifically. I don't know about you, but even to me, Malaysians all look alike. But whereas when you look at us, we look more Indonesian.
For 6 generations, the Cocos Malays have lived and worked on this tiny coral reef, around 2 kilometres long and 1 kilometre wide.
Mum's always telling me stories about how they would still have to get off their bikes and bow to John Clunies Ross and his supervisors whenever they went past. It was compulsory for you to do that or you get punished.
In the 1970s, Australian journalists exposed the outdated colonial world of the Clunies Ross dynasty.
These days there are many dispirited Cocos Islanders living on Home Island, the centre of the Clunies Ross estate.
From then on, its days were numbered. A decade later, Siti's family were offered the chance to vote for their freedom.
I think it's really hard to say what their expectations are when they voted.
For the first time, the Cocos Malays are given a say on their future. We chose to be a part of Australia, we chose to be Australian citizens. All we've known is Cocos, and that's not your typical Australian suburb.
It's like going to a day spa.
So Raman grew up here for a little bit when he was still a boy, but then he's lived in Perth pretty much the whole of his life.
Siti's brother-in-law is preparing for his upcoming wedding, a celebration for the whole village that can last up to a month.
He's not used to the full extent of the Cocos Malay wedding.
Takes a few days to get ready, that's for sure.
Raman has returned to Cocos to marry a local girl, lured back by love and his people's strong connection to the islands.
Been in the mainland for 20 years, so it's good to come back.
So he's being pasted with some yellow stuff. It's actually a mixture of turmeric, guava leaves, lime leaves and uncooked rice to make him look a little bit yellower than his normal skin colour, which is, I know the Europeans like to be tanned as a measure of attractiveness. The more tan you are, the more attractive. For us, the yellower you are, the more attractive.
It's done.
The sheer remoteness of the Cocos Islands leaves the community depending on regular visits by an Australian supply ship, bringing groceries from the mainland.
Morning.
Morning.
But the ship is 3 weeks late. It's a big problem for Siti, who manages the local supermarket, where the stock is rapidly running out.
We've turned off a whole freezer completely because there's nothing there.
With her brother-in-law's wedding approaching fast, there's a feast to prepare and little to prepare it with.
Onions, potatoes, nothing there. Milk, water, oil and drinks. As you can see, very rare. Even your things like your tomato sauce and that, they're all gone too.
We don't get any control over the ship. We are only a small voice. We don't hold a lot of power. Unless the government steps in and provides an alternative, then there goes our supply.
For 200 years, we looked after ourselves pretty well, thank you very much. We are quite capable of governing ourselves, and we've proven it over a period almost longer than Australia's federated. Going to the farmer with an A, which is where I grow stuff, so it keeps me out of trouble. When Australia was still taking convicts, we had our own resources, our own merchant navy, we could build ships, and we were trading with the outside world.
It's been just over 30 years since the Clunies-Ross dynasty were ousted and John was banished to West Island.
We still get some good cucumbers, as you can see.
John still aspires to self-sufficiency, though at times he struggles with the new Australian regulations.
You're not allowed to use your own poo anymore and stuff like that, you know. I mean, that would be the ideal situation, is everyone have a poo in a paddock and we'd come in and put some sweet potatoes in afterwards. But yeah, we're not allowed to do that. This is the shade house. Seedlings around here, so there's my seedling area, and there's more carrots coming up there. So this is mint, Chinese greens, line of basil. Yeah, I can't grow tomatoes over my bloody life. So these are bees here. They're pretty mellow. Yeah, well, I learned a bit from the old man. He loved his seaweed. It's got all the nutrients you need in it, but it's really hard to get seaweed at the moment, and if you get it, that's the duck's nuts. Yeah. Some nice yellow capsicums like that, very nice. Some rats. I was catching 4 a night when I first started. Now we're down to maybe 5 a week. And you sort of drown those in a special bucket over here for drowning rats. Oh, job's done. X-rat.
Come on, everybody.
The supply ship is still nowhere to be seen, but the Cocos Malays are pressing on with wedding preparations. The father of the bride is Ron Grant. He's a unique figure on the island, an Australian mainlander who converted to Islam and started a family here.
Weddings for Cocos Malays are extremely important because it's basically a contract between 2 parties, our family and another family. They join together. Because we're so isolated, the lack of facilities, a lot depends upon the community assisting each other. You've got to remember the population is only about 450 people, and the family networks are very extensive because it's been a very closed society for many, many years.
Well, I'm the marriage celebrant and the chief imam on Cocos Island, and I will be conducting the marriage in the mosque here.
Haji Adam is the spiritual leader of Home Island. With so many young people being drawn to the big cities on the mainland, he sees online dating as a way of tempting them back home.
We are such a small community, we don't have enough boys and we don't have enough girls. But now, because of the Facebook, that's where they found their boyfriends or fiancé anyway. More clear for them to see when they open the Facebook and they saw the person, you know, faces and the body, how the body shape looked like and so on. Yeah.
It's the day before the wedding, and the supply ship finally drops anchor. The stevedores work against the clock, aware that a nervous bride and groom are counting on them. With the supermarket shelves restocked, City joins the women to help prepare the wedding feast.
I'm just heading down to the bride's house to do more cooking, taking over some stuff that I've prepared earlier, as they say.
People think remote island, paradise, sipping coconut juice under a coconut tree, but the mechanics behind it and all the logistics takes a lot of organising and management.
This is some sort of glutinous dessert made out of pumpkin.
The The ceremonial dish served at a wedding would normally be the red-footed booby, a migratory bird that's helped the Cocos Malays survive in isolation for 6 generations.
Historically, it's been part of our identity. I was brought up eating that. You know, you saw the chicken and with the sort of sambal sauce there. In the olden days, it'd probably be booby bird.
But shortly after they joined Australia, Canberra signed a treaty classifying the booby bird as a protected species. And now their traditional meal is off the menu.
A lot of the people here think that they should be treated as the turtles are treated for the Aborigines because that was part of their main diet culturally. It'd be good, especially for the older people, because they crave for that as part of their diet still.
Siti's brother-in-law, Rahman, is about to seal his future on the island. Cocos Malay weddings have evolved in isolation. A unique blend of Islam and the animist traditions of the first settlers.
Back in 1826, when our first generation came here, they are the people who really established our culture on Cocos.
Haji Adam's ancestors were collected from ports in Africa and Asia. They brought their traditions with them, but their histories were left behind.
When they arrived, nothing here. There's no one living in town. It's really bushes.
The Cocos Malays have no knowledge of their ancestry prior to settlement, and their culture has been built from scratch on these islands.
That's why people here on Cocos should be considered as an indigenous community.
The influence of their Scottish rulers seeped into their traditions. And now Siti and her family dance a Scottish jig in a hijab on a tiny island in the Indian Ocean.
The connections the Cocos Malays feel to Cocos Island runs as deep as it gets, really, because this is what we know. This is what our generations have known. Our first ancestors were here. So it goes down really deep. It's like as deep as some of the roots here of the trees who have been here forever.
West Island is just a 20-minute ferry ride from the Cocos Malays village. But culturally, it's a world away. It's the CBD of the Cocos Islands, home to a transient community of Aussie mainlanders.
So that's where most of the Orang Putties live, the white fellas. So we've got a lot of government contract, RAF, teachers, shire workers.
A giant runway takes up nearly a third of West Island's length and is part of the strangest golf course in Australia.
So this is Scroungers Golf on Thursday. This is where we get to hit across the international runway, the only place in the world that we get to do that.
Yeah, coming up your shot.
Aaron Bowman is the CEO of Cocos Shire Council. He left a high-stress job on the mainland and moved his family to the Indian Ocean for the most literal of sea changes.
So I came here 2.5 years ago. So I got 4 young kids, and it's such a safe place. You know, you leave your keys in your car, house unlocked, and it's a really good place for kids.
Aaron's invested his family's future on the Cocos Islands. But their new life is about to be turned upside down. The Cocos Islands runway is an important strategic asset for the Australian Armed Forces. And Canberra has told Aaron that they're planning a major military expansion.
Whatever happens, 100 personnel comes, they have planes landing every 5 minutes, upping the military presence and that's a huge decision. The difference between Home Island and West Island is West Island, you've got a lot of people that are on 2, 3, 4 year contracts that are in and out. If they don't like it, they can leave. Home Island don't have that choice. This is their home. This is where their parents or grandparents are buried, so it will have a bigger impact for the Home Islanders.
We're a landing strip out in the middle of the ocean. Really, we're the cheapest aircraft carrier in the Australian Navy.
An Australian government aircraft is about to land on the islands, and the golfers aren't the only ones to be cleared from the runway.
The last thing you want is chickens like this one you see up here by this light, that close to the runway, and that's where the plane's going to land, so that'd be right in the danger zone. If he gets scared by the plane and he flies up, he's virtually 10 metres away from the jets. All traffic COCUS. Car 2 has vacated runway 1533. Wildlife inspection complete. COCUS.
After a 7-hour flight from Canberra, a government jet brings a committee of politicians to the islands. They're here to deal with the increasing community concerns about the military expansion.
I think a lot of people have the views that it doesn't matter what we say, they're going to do what they want to do. Obviously, from a defence point of view, they need us. I think at times Australia accepts us as part of Australia when they want us to be, and other times I think they forget about us.
The communities on West Island and Home Island might be as different as night and day, but the prospect of a major military base on their doorstep threatens to change all their lives forever.
I declare open the inquiry into the strategic importance of the Indian Ocean territories. Good morning. Thank you participants for their written submissions and making time to speak to the committee today. I also welcome anyone who's come along to observe today's proceedings.
The politicians have called a public meeting. Some Cocos Malays are worried that Australia's plans have little regard for the impact on their unique culture. And John Clooney's Ross knows all too well what it feels like to be steamrolled by Canberra.
Today's focus will be on the impact of local communities. I'd like to talk about the current defence capabilities here on the island and about what future defence capabilities may be. I might just welcome Mr Clooney's Ross to the inquiry. And Mr Clooney's Ross, that's something that you accept, the fact that your location here provides strategic importance?
I was told that it has made us a target for a nuclear strategic missile. I don't think that was quite explained to people, but now we are a target for a strategic nuclear weapon, and we were vaporised at the start of the Third World War. I think you can do pretty much whatever you like, because as soon as that button goes, we're gone.
During World War II, John's grandfather agreed to let Allied forces use the West Island runway. Japanese bombers attacked in retaliation, destroying 27 houses and killing 2 Cocos Islanders.
Kalau perkara sudah besar terjadi, jangan sampai nanti kita ni kena tercabut daripada pulu bawa di mana-mana. Itu tak baru terjadi begitu.
You all keep saying that how unique we are, how, we're culturally diverse, how unique we are. With the rebuild of the runway, and then with the more defence force being here more, if we keep bringing all this outside environment, all the influences to the islands, then I see that as a concern.
The islanders' comments raise eyebrows from the politicians, prompting questions about the Cocos Malays' allegiance to their adopted nation.
To what part do the islanders feel part of Australia? If you don't feel part of Australia more broadly, that is a question of strategic importance for us.
We're Australian, and not a lot of people realise that.
They may be Muslim. They may also be originally from Southeast Asia. But there is no question they're not Australians.
We are islanders first, And we are different, but we are Australians.
We've been through a lot of changes on Cocos Island. Sometimes it doesn't go down well with the community, but if we're going to be part of Australia, we just have to take it.
You know, we're just as Australian as them. We're as Australian as the next guy who wears flip-flops and a singlet.
The questioning of their loyalty to Australia could not have come at a worse time. Today, the Cocos Malays celebrate the anniversary of their momentous decision to become Australian. But they never thought they'd have to choose between their islander identity and their new flag.
Welcome, everyone. We'll just have a quick briefing and then we'll get the games underway.
Active Self-Determination Day, that was when we chose to be a part of Australia. We chose to be Australian citizens. And we celebrate that every year. And I think everyone's quite proud to be a part of Australia.
I'm not a big one for Self-Determination Day. I think I don't boycott it, but I drag my feet a little bit on Self-Determination Day. These are smallest of the giant clams. We breed them for aquarium tanks, and this section here is the gonad. So you put it in the water, they pucker up if they're sexy, and they'll release sperm. If not, then we just go to the pub and we drink beer and try again next month. When the Commonwealth looked to depose my family from the position of authority, the locals voted to integrate with Australia, but what actually happened was we still got a colonial administration, so we have a de facto colonial administration.
Oh, hi everybody. Welcome to Oceana House. This is the old house that belonged to the Clooney's Ross family.
The visiting politicians have wrapped up their official business. Unaware of the discontent they've sown in the community, they take a tour of John's old family home.
Very much the baronial manor, isn't it?
Oh, it is, and that's the function that it played.
Before Canberra took control, the Clooney's Ross family governed the islands from a grand old mansion set apart from the rest of the village.
So this was the first John that settled here. The Clooney's Ross, when they had their workers here, they never ever attempted to Christianise them or change their language or anything like that, which has happened in so many parts of the world.
Canberra's visit has raised troubling questions for the Home Islanders. Have they swapped one colonial ruler for another? And how can they protect their culture?
Lattes are not for consumption now, they're for the lunch. Yeah, it's all building up to the rugby, so the main event of the day would be the rugby. They're pumped. The sense of camaraderie between the boys in rugby is, all-time high.
We're playing for everyone out there, your family, your wife, your kids, basically everyone. We're playing for all Cocos. They came here, give it to them. Fuck them, boys. Yeah! Ah!
The Cocos Malays have a point to prove in front of the Canberra delegation. To be proud Australians, they don't need to surrender their Cocos Malay identity.
You can be completely Cocos Malay but also still be Australian because Cocos is a part of Australia. And if people believe strongly enough in something, there is the fire and there is that passion, and absolutely they will fight tooth and nail for it. Ideally, this is what Australia should be represented as. It's all the different cultures, everyone coming together.
Always be thankful to the #1 creator.
Indigenous Senator Malandiri McCarthy is a Yanyuwa woman from the Northern Territory.
Oh, thank you.
She understands what it's like to have an identity that predates the Australian nation.
When I walk around here on Home Island, it's very much the strength of culture, and talking to the families here, men and women, you do get that sense of relationship to country.
For the Cocos Malays, this is another celebration without booby birds on the barbecue. With their traditional meal now illegal, the birds are becoming a symbol of decisions made by Canberra with little consideration for local culture.
Tim, you got this side, Tim?
This is the traditional Jukung rice.
Cocos Shire President Balmut Pires is team captain on a Jukong sailboat, originally used for hunting the birds.
A little bit more, not too much, on the center.
The locals think they should have access to some of the seabirds, but that's not happening at the moment. Too many people, I think. Got 6 crew instead of 5, but that's a chance you take, right? People should respect the local. They should respect the elders of this land or this country. I feel indigenous to this island. Our ancestors was here long before anybody else.
I am listening to all the Cocos Islanders. I know that there are many who've discussed the fact that are they Indigenous to the Cocos? And I think probably, you know, an obvious answer would be, well, yes.
The idea of Indigenous status raises many questions on the island.
Where's the booby bird?
Could it give them more bargaining power when Canberra makes sweeping decisions about their future?
It really does come down to perhaps more the definition of Indigenous. And that's a question that I think will be debated for some time.
Satay.
Yum. So good.
It's different to like Indigenous on the mainland.
Yeah.
We know that, but yeah, it is just the Cocos. Yeah.
To recognise it, but also recognise that it's not the same as Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islanders.
Yeah.
The elders are sharing their opinions with Cocos CEO Aaron Bowman. They hope that being recognised as the island's first people could help protect their culture and even reinstate their hunting rights.
That's our diet. That's why they're stopping us to have that. You know? That's our diet in our ancestors.
I want to find out what booby bird tastes like.
The elders have asked Aaron to investigate. He's leading an expedition to the far reaches of the Cocos Archipelago, North Keeling Island, breeding ground for the migrating booby bird. He wants to help the Cocos Malays take the first steps on the road to Indigenous recognition.
For the home islanders, this is something that they want, they've asked for, and I'm here to represent them as well, so that's what I'm doing.
Aaron's brought together 2 men who know North Keeling Island like the back of their hand and represent both sides of the Cocos Islands' divided history.
Nice snooze on the way up, so no disturbing me. Nice snooze on the way back.
John Clooney's Ross, whose family once ruled these islands, and Balmut Pires, a leader of the Cocos Malay community that kicked John's family out.
Get out of the way, you bloody fruit.
Whoa!
Oh shit, we've lost him.
Aaron wants to revisit the issues of seabirds. So I think Aaron wants to go to North Keeling to see for himself what it is over there.
North Keeling Island is uninhabited and surrounded by razor-sharp coral reef. It's notoriously difficult to access.
Okay.
Let's go.
As young men, John and Balmut both learned to hunt boobies here. But now access is restricted, and today they're under escort by a National Parks ranger.
When I was a kid, there was just one bay between that point and that point. Now there's 3 bays. You want to not point? Yeah, that's what I'm worried about. Oh, you got a blunt end, so you're a mate. You can see a booby bird nesting up in a tree just next to us. Once a year you'd come here and you'd be harvesting booby birds, salting it in tins, and we'd just be eating the heads and the arseholes of the camp. But yeah, it's got a lot of good memories for me.
John and Balmut's ancestors have been hunting on North Keeling for 6 generations.
Oh, I'm getting too old for this.
Aaron understands their hunting rights predate Australian law.
Surely having some sort of access to booby birds
like Aboriginals and Torres Strait would be a reasonable thing.
If they can't get Australia to recognise their status as First People, this island will remain off limits, with booby birds off the menu forever.
Pingin is the Malay word. It's like a soul hunger for the food, for the bird. So it's a different hunger, like a memory hunger.
Before leaving the island, Balmert must pay his respect to the graves of his ancestors, plantation workers for John's family in the early days of the first settlement.
This grave was local people from Home Island. I think they come, it was about 1880.
So you're saying it's been over 150 years Cocos Malay's been coming to North Keeling.
Come here for the water. The local legend was that the water here, not that it's very nice, it will cure you of beriberi. And beriberi was vitamin B deficiency.
Yeah.
The graves are a reminder for John and Balmert that they both share a history and an unbroken connection to this land.
Johnny always regarded as the Cocos Malay. He breed and play on the Cocos Island like he's always regarded as one of us.
Aaron's hatched a plan to take John and Balmert to Canberra and make a case for recognition as the first people of Cocos. But he's not sure Australia is ready for a small town of Indigenous Muslims and an Indigenous white man.
I think the interesting thing would be that would make Johnny Clunes-Ross Indigenous as well.
They're Indigenous to Cocos. We're not saying same as Aboriginals, we're not saying the same as Torres Strait Islanders. We need to consider that perhaps there is another category of Indigenous Australians.
Bloody hell, man.
Nearly 6,000 kilometres from their tropical home, Canberra's winter chill is a rude awakening for the Cocos Islanders.
Where's the global warming when you need it? Come on. It was like 3 degrees at 10 o'clock yesterday.
Just over 3 decades ago, Balmert Pyrrhus lived under the rule of the Clunies-Ross family.
Hey guys.
In a remarkable twist of fate, he's now collaborating with John Clunies-Ross to convince Australia they're both Indigenous to the Cocos Islands.
I am Indigenous. Am I a Cocos Islander? Yes, I'm a Cocos Islander. Is he a Cocos Islander? Yes, he's a Cocos Islander. We eat the same fish, eat the same rice, eat the same onions.
Placed together when you're small.
Yeah.
Even though he's living in a different environment now, but it's still part of the Cocos Islanders.
Balmert and John hope Indigenous recognition could return their hunting rights and give them some leverage over Canberra's plans for their island home. Their campaign begins tonight as they enter the belly of the beast with a gala dinner at Parliament House.
Johnny doesn't wear shoes, so apparently been doing a few exercises to get used to wearing shoes.
Good tie.
It is formal, so shirt, tie, jacket. The only time he's wore a tie before is when he's got married, and that was twice, and look how that turned out.
Look like a bloody orangutan in a shirt.
Chicken or lamb? Oh, hang on. They don't get a choice.
Parliament House is bursting at the seams with Shire councillors from all over Australia, vying for the attention of Canberra's power brokers.
We're from Cocos, Australia. We've got 27 islands in Cocos. We're now formally asking whether we're Indigenous. We're here to preserve the heritage, the culture of Cocos. We're here for the recognition. Minister. It's okay, we've only come 6,000 k's to be here. Very good advisor there, reminding the Minister who we are.
Hey, we're looking buff, mate. You're looking buff. You're looking good, mate.
Quick photo. Johnny, keep your hands to yourself. Alright, see ya. Talk to you later. People don't even know where Cocos is, and they sort of go, oh yeah, I think I know where that is. They got no idea. Someone thought we were just a couple of 100 metres off the bloody WA coast.
It dawns on the Cocos team that perhaps Canberra's just forgotten who they are, and they might have to blow some trumpets to make Australia pay attention.
And there's times I just wish I was carrying a map because they don't know where the Indian Ocean is either. It's a very strange place.
They head into the hallowed halls of Australia's government, but the men are far from natural diplomats.
What happened to your shirt I gave you?
Well, I washed it, put it on the radiator to dry, and it shrunk about 3 inches in every direction. Who knows where they're going?
I do. We're just around the corner around here.
Oh, that's cool.
What's the worst that can happen?
We can get lost.
Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have always known they have an enduring connection to land and sea that is captured in Australia's native title laws.
Talking to some of the Northern Territory Indigenous local governments, they talk about empowering the locals. That's what we want to do as well.
So what's your name?
Aaron.
Inspired by the advice from Australia's First People, their campaign gains momentum.
We're catching up with you tomorrow.
Yeah, all right, no drama. We'll catch you up there.
Yeah, catch up.
Good on you, brother.
Lobbying politicians and hustling journalists from major national newspapers.
We're in the cafe now. If someone wanted to come and get us, we can wait.
Hey, guys. Hey.
Go on. We're asking the question whether Cocos Malays are Indigenous.
Mate, nice to meet you again, mate. Very important that anyone making a decision for the island so has to come out there first.
Look at this, mate. Look at that. Flesh me up.
By the time they reach Indigenous Senator Malandiri McCarthy, news of their push for recognition is racing through the halls of Parliament.
There is no doubt you would have opened up a real can of worms. Well, I think you're doing the right thing. I just want to support you in any way that I can because I know how hard it is for families out there.
We'll see you over there.
Busy week for you, I'm sure.
They're saying that we open a can of worm, but if it's going to benefit the Cocos Islanders, then they'll go for it.
Back on home soil, Balmet discovers their hard work in Canberra has paid off when their story makes the front page of a national newspaper.
Islanders take first tentative steps in quest for a future mainland identity. It's mainly talking about getting recognition as Indigenous for Cocos Island.
Australia is waking up to the idea that it may have just adopted an Indigenous Muslim population.
Cocos Island is Australia, but we want to be Indigenous for Cocos Island, and it's always good to have a title. You know, it's make you proud of who you are and where you're coming from.
John Clunies Ross might have lost everything when Australia ousted his family, but he sees a future for himself on these islands, living side by side with the people whose entire history is entwined with his own.
If you give people rights, the sky doesn't fall in. It's not a legal issue. It's a recognition. And to me, I am Indigenous, as all my homie mates are. We're an Indigenous community. That's where I took a chip off the mower. My family struggled in the years after the separation, and I saw the Kampong, the homies, struggle too. My father was heartbroken. I was left without a job. And I struggled to find relevance, I guess, as much as anything else. And the homies then had to struggle with democracy. They tried to break my family from this community, and it's failed. I'm still here. I'm still fully integrated with the community. You know, I love them. They love me.
And that's where all the Clunies Ross one is. This must be the mother. I remember her, she's a nice lady. So Johnny's father, when he died, probably buried there. This is Johnny's great-grandfather, George Clunies Ross. Oh, sorry guys, we don't have anything here. I might go and talk to Johnny and see if we can sort of rebuild this again, like put something that people can talk about. The Clunies Ross, they're not part of the Muslim community, but they're part of our family.
It's Australia Day, and we're in Australia.
John and Balmet have taken control of the barbecue on the very spot where in 1827 John's ancestor first pinned his flag to a coconut palm. History and politics may have done their best to divide the two men, but today they come together to celebrate as proud Australians.
Happy Australia Day. Selamat Australia Day.
Celebrating their own tiny piece of Australia where they can pray to Allah, play two-up on Anzac Day, dance a Scottish reel, make offerings to the spirits and knock back a tinny or two.
Australia Day is important because it's a good day to catch up with the people you work with on a casual basis, because we don't see them down the pub obviously, and they don't see us in their mosque.
Hopefully it can be an example of what life between different cultures can be like.
Don't worry, we're very organised.
It's not that we're all Musos, it's not that we're all Christians, we're all Cocos Islanders. You can come here and know nothing of us, and within a very short time you'll aspire to be one of us.